if more people were educated on what's happening, they could take better action. And, with the voting piece of it, we're coming into an election, and pay attention to the policies, pay attention to people's positions on things, and don't vote based on what initial is next to their name, whether it's an R or D. Vote on what they stand for and what this country needs.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. Today we got a special guest, Matt Schneider. You're a former SWAT officer, undercover operator, VP of Ops currently for Fit Pro Tracker. Did I get all that?
You did. Also, we talked a bit about Dr. Lyon. We were prepping. I'm the chief of operations for a company as well.
Oh, word. For what's the name of the company?
Well, it's the Institute of Muscle Centric Medicine.
Good. I'm glad you said it. That's a bit of a tongue twister. Yeah, Gabrielle Lyon, who you remember from Drinking Bros. If you saw that episode, she's functional medicine, I guess you could say, gut health, all that stuff. So let's talk about you though, since you're the one that's here. Tell me a little bit about your upbringing, how you ended up in law enforcement. Where'd you grow up and stuff?
I grew up all over Southern California. I mean, my background really it's centered around a revolving door of men coming and going my entire childhood. My mom, she always would enter into relationships of if it didn't work out, she'd just get divorced. So she's on her 9th divorce currently. What that led to as a kid was a lot of restarts, a lot of moves, going from one city or state to the next, one school to the next. And but something that I really am actually very thankful for because of the resiliency that it's developed within me. And when you look at the SWAT side of things and what I did with the U.S. Marshals team, the fact that I always knew it was going to be okay, and the fact that we always have these restarts, I contribute to my ability to always stay really level-headed and one that doesn't act out of emotion and is much more responsive versus reactive. But grew up all over Southern California, moved to Idaho, Eastern Idaho, when I was a teenager, graduated from high school there, and then moved to Boise, where I went to Boise State University, got a degree in psychology, and then got on with the sheriff's office in 2006. And then I was full-time with them till 2014. I became an entrepreneur in 2013. And so I did both for a little while. I stayed on as an admin reserve for a little while until 2019. And then just transitioned fully into the entrepreneurial space.
Sweet. Yeah, it's interesting the way you describe, I guess, the revolving door or whatever you want to call it, or moving around a lot, or just instability in general, right? It is it's one of these lessons we learn that pop up all over the place, whether it's in like core strengthening fitness or your ability to work under pressure, or your ability to handle personal situations without being overreactive to them and stuff like that. It is some low level version of that, almost like an inoculation early on that teaches you how to do that. There's good research now that shows rough housing with your kids, like doing wrestling moves on them, or throwing them in the pool and shit like that, help them develop a sense of confidence and low-level conflict resolution that they wouldn't get otherwise with all of this safetyism parenting. So, I kind of I had a not so great childhood my own self, and definitely you become pretty resilient from it. I mean, one of the I don't know if this is true for SWAT or officers in general, but one of the hallmarks of the special operations community is they come from broken homes. Like 80% of them, something like an inordinate amount of them come from broken homes. And then the other thing is that they burn cortisol at a level that's a rate that's much higher than any of their peers. So that's pretty interesting that it works out that way, no matter what the circumstances. It seems like you're training your body and brain for something.
Yeah, totally. And I think probably also stepping into that protector and provider role much earlier on, and just having, many more years of experience in it, and much more repetition in stepping up as that protector as life goes on. So It's interesting about the cortisol piece as well. I mean, that also makes a ton of sense. But yeah, man, I never, talked to the teammates enough to know their background to this degree. But with you saying that, I wish I would have, because that is super interesting, because that is a level. You have to stay level headed. Obviously, if you're going into an unknown circumstance, you know very few things about what's going on inside, or where the dirt bag is, and you just got to figure it out as you go. One way to really get into trouble very quickly is to be working and acting and thinking with emotion. Um, and the ones that do that, they don't last on the team very long at all.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what we try to do is you train your brain and body to react dispassionately, I guess, right? I mean, you can't,
Mm-hmm.
if there's a level of emotion involved in some of these situations, it can get out of hand pretty quickly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a bad way. You make bad decisions. Emotional decisions are typically not good decisions. I mean, you know, whether it's sadness or rage or whatever, we do stupid shit, or fear.
Hmm.
You can't let yourself get involved in that. What was it? So you go to college, finish that. What made you decide to join the sheriff's department rather than the military or city police or professional career or something like that? What was it about that?
Yeah, it's funny. When it came to the military, well, growing up, I don't come from a family of veterans at all, and so as I grew up, because we moved around so much, I had very little exposure to any sort of mentorship and guidance from other like strong men, and certainly never interacted with any kind of recruiter or anything along those lines. And so I always thought, as a young man, that the military is for old people. Like, I thought it was like where grown ass men went. I didn't know that was something that was an option even after school. But when it came to the law enforcement side of it, it's a funny, stupid story. But I was dating the bakery girl when I was a bag boy in high school, and things weren't working out with her. The spark just wasn't there. But Lincoln McDonald, he was the checker at Albertsons, and he had something for her. And I said, "Look, man, it's not working out between us, but I'd be happy to make an intro to my girlfriend." And so I introed them. They got married. He became a cop, and I guess as a thank you or something, he reached out one day and took me for a ride along.
Mm.
And even though nothing of any significance happened during that shift, I thought it was a really cool thing as to what law enforcement was doing out there. And as I was talking to him, he was like kind of one of the first guys that was standing up for protecting others that couldn't protect themselves. And at any given moment, something could kick off. And I thought that was really exciting. I thought the unpredictability of what was happening was exciting, and also just knowing that they were standing in that fold between the wrongdoers and the people that just want to live their life and chase down the American dream. And so that planted the seed. So before I moved to Boise to go to Boise State, I went down to the Idaho State University. They have a program down there where you get post certified.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went through it. It's a 9-month program, which I got patrol certified and then detention certified. And that was my way of really just seeing whether or not that was a profession I wanted to do. And I loved it. I really enjoyed it. So when it came time to moving down to Boise after I graduated, it was very clear I wanted to go down that path. I really loved the just the dynamic component of being in law enforcement. I really gravitated towards the chaotic, and the dicier it was, like the happier I was, and the more I found like I thrived. So it really just, for whatever reason, based on my personality, was something that I really matched up with really well.
Mm. Yeah, I think we all get that itch to do manly shit. I think people call it your Hemingway moment or whatever, when he goes off to the Merchant Marines or whatever the fuck he did.
Mm.
You know, if you're a healthy man, that appeals to you, the sense of adventure and whatever the fuck, right?
Hmm.
We're kind of programmed that way.
Hmm.
And then, it takes what I think as we've become more civilized and civilization has grown more, it's kind of leaned maybe away from the adventure part as a primary concern, and then towards the provide and protect part, right? A little bit
Hmm.
more.
Hmm.
I think it's really important, especially for people who didn't experience that as a child from a strong male. I think maybe you crave it even more than a normal person would. And it's a big problem for dudes because they don't know how to articulate that even to themselves. So they
Hmm.
feel this sense, they feel this urge, they feel this sense of this need to go do something like that to serve their community. They can't figure out a way to do it, or sometimes they can't even articulate it themselves. That's what they're needing, and it feels you feel useless, alone, which are the worst
Hmm.
things you can feel as a man, right?
Yeah.
And one of the big issues, excuse me, in our society these days is that we no longer have these rites of passage that kind of give structure and guidance to aggressive young men to put them
Hmm.
out in the world in places where they need to be. So it's interesting that one kind of just organically popped up around you. I don't think that happens for most people, frankly.
Yeah, I'm thankful for it. I mean, it's anybody's guess what direction I would have gone had that opportunity not presented itself, because as you and I know, this whole topic of masculinity and being that protector and having a level of aggression, even if it is to protect other innocent people, it's largely frowned upon by a good portion of society. And whether they realize what it is they're actually even suggesting by way of reducing masculinity, you take that in conjunction with reduced testosterone over the decades, and the you know the this 10 plus years of the Beyoncés and the others talking about how it's a woman's world, and they don't need men, and men are essentially good for nothing. It's a recipe for weakness, and as we know, weakness causes really hard times, and is a big factor in what is we're even experiencing in this country and even around the world.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, I mean, part of in the military, we talk about readiness a lot. Like, okay, it is all encompassing. Do we have the right logistic setup to be able to deploy? Are our people actually ready to not just deploy, but to thrive in the deployment, right? We don't really think of things that way in the civilian world for some reason. I don't know why. I mean, it's the same thing, right? Like you need readiness and resilience amongst your doers, whomever they happen to be, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and this isn't just a man thing either. Like, men need to be ready to do the things men do, and women need to be ready to do the things that women do. And yeah, that the lack of that very clearly defined rite of passage is a real problem for us because it isn't like we're not trying to affect a particular outcome or another. It's like
Mm-hmm.
really just a crucible for you to find out what you can handle and what you can't. Maybe get better at some of those things, but specifically, you're going to be good at something. There's something you're going to be good at. For some people,
Mm-hmm.
it's listening and processing information and turning complex ideas into simple ones. For some people, it's going to be athletic shit. It's going to be a little bit different for everybody. But how are you ever going to know, right? Without that, without the Boy Scouts or without whatever, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's not just, it's not an a la carte thing. It's just woven into the fabric of society, right? And we just don't
Yeah.
have that shit anymore. And we're having a really hard time trying to recreate that, to be honest. I'm not sure how that's going to go. I know a lot of people are doing these programs for young men and stuff like that, but it's like one weekend out of the year, once in your high
Mm-hmm.
school years, is not going to do it, man. It needs to be like
Mm-hmm.
literally part of society. Otherwise, it's never going to really work.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think it's really a matter of leaning into doing hard things. And, I've got a 14-year-old son, and, you know, who I allow to be in our ethers, the environmental exposure that I allow for, our son, all of that stuff matters because of, um, who he is identifying to be role models. And, of course, one weekend doing something for a father son, that's going to create memories, but it's not going to create change. It's not going to create lasting change. I really love what Matt Bedrow and Tim Kennedy are doing with the Apogee program. Things like that are really necessary. They're really, really needed because it's ongoing development for young men
Mm-hmm.
and for their dads. Um, and our son goes to a private school where the headmaster is now doing some curriculum stuff for the Apogee program, and so they're starting one here locally too. So our son right now goes to this private school, and they say the Pledge of Allegiance. They put up and take down the flag. They don't allow any of the woke related stuff. There's no books that talk about transgender, or, chicks with dicks and
Mm-hmm.
dudes with boobs and any of that stuff. And so I see that as an obligation to my son and to the next generation, and to be not exposing him to things that confuse him, or things that, um, quite frankly, just don't do society and this country any favors.
Yeah, you mentioned something before about heroes. It matters who heroes are in society. You know what I mean? It used to be. We
Mm-hmm.
did a panel in Vegas last week, and I talked about this a little bit. We used to have heroes like Jimmy Stewart, the actor who retired as a major general in the Air Force, or you know Ted Williams, who left his Hall of Fame baseball career twice to serve this country and fight in actual
Mm-hmm.
combat.
Mm-hmm.
And more recently, people like Pat Tillman or Tim Kennedy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Both of whom were at the top of their game in professional sports, but
Mm-hmm.
still served their country at the same time at the highest levels that you can serve your country. And now it seems like, who are kids emulating now, right? Because it sure as shit isn't these guys. And,
Yeah.
we can, I've really grown tired of this proclivity we have to shit talk the next generation or two and say, oh, these kids these days, like you made those motherfucking kids, dude. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
who are you talking about? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's like Bill Gates complaining about Microsoft. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft sucks. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, you fucking made it, bud.
Yeah.
Like what happened with us where whether it was, I mean, for mine and your generation, it was the latchkey kid thing. We raised ourselves, or television did, and that just kind of
Mm-hmm.
got amplified as time was more technology and more TV stations and whatever the fuck else came out. We were raised by digital media, by propaganda, frankly, right? That told you that masculinity wasn't the best thing, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
that's a watered down version of what they really said. Obviously, it's like sitcoms and talk or daytime television have been trashing men for years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. Like if like I like comedy as much as the next guy, but if the message behind it is that masculinity is bad and we need to do something about that, we can't really blame the kids that come out acting like bitches. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're the ones
Yeah.
that let them sit down in front of that fucking device and watch that shit for 20 years as they grew up, and
Mm-hmm.
now they don't move out and get a job. Or like, well, what happened? Like, well, they're not a
Yeah.
fucking man. That's what happened, and they're not a man because you didn't make them one.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's a tough pill for them to swallow, but I mean that's the truth. There's no arguing that.
And then something you said before as well, about I guess gravitating towards chaos,
Mm.
is something that I think a lot of people who listen to this they'll feel that, like, it makes sense. It'll make sense to them because they certainly experience something similar. I wonder for you though, because this is a problem for guys coming back from deployment or when they get out of the military and shit. When you go back into normal life, to civilian life, where it's not all high tempo chaos and shit like that, it can be difficult to slow back down, and then it can really have a negative impact, a negative effect on your personal relationships because
Mm-hmm.
you're spinning at 72 RPMs and everybody else is spinning at 45. And you got to like figure that out. I wonder from your case, or in your case rather, when you were younger, especially, did that propensity for chaos like did it have a bad impact on your personal relationships, and then how did you overcome that? If that was the case, obviously.
When I was in before SWAT and
Hmm.
law enforcement, or afterwards.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess answer that however you want, but yeah, both of those.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, especially after leaving the SWAT team, spending 5 years as an entry operator, a couple years with the U.S. Marshals. That was the fugitive team where we chased down the most violent criminals out there. Um, I really felt like I was in my element when I was doing that, but my wife hated it because my phone would go off and I'd be out the door in a few minutes and she wouldn't know where I was going and she wouldn't hear from me for sometimes 10 hours and sometimes a day. And that really took a toll on her and it took a toll on our relationship. And so I committed early on when I was aware of what the revolving door of men and these constant restarts was doing to myself and my siblings, that I was never going to do that um, when I grew up. When I was a kid and I'm 10 years old sitting in my room with a friend, we're looking at these trophies on the wall and I've got, basketball and I've got soccer and baseball and these trophies. There's 5 or 6 of them there and they have 3 different last names on them. And, there's a point where when you're a kid, you don't know what other households are like, and you just think your normal is everybody else's normal. And so, my buddy's asking me about why I've got these different last names, and I tell him, well, it's because my mom just gets remarried, and I guess I just take the last name. I don't know. And I'm like, wait, you don't have trophies with different last names on it? That's not the same for you? And he's like, no, I forgot. My trophies all have the same last name. My dad's my dad. And that was when I really realized that what was happening inside the house, this lack of commitment to the relationships was having, well, like, it just wasn't normal. And that's when I was like, I'm not going to do this. When I grow up, I don't know how many kids I'm going to have, but I'm not going to expose my family and myself to this. I'm going to break the cycle. And so when I started seeing the negative impact it was having on my relationship with my wife and our young son, um, I knew that if I kept doing it, that I was likely going to continue down the path that ultimately many law enforcement and military do, which is divorce. And I was not going to repeat the cycle. And so I lashed onto that and lashed onto the real big picture about the next generation and what my son was going to be exposed to. And I was not going to put him through a scenario where he had a bi-nuclear family and he was sharing his weekends between the two people that he loves and cherishes the most. And so that's where I went to undercover narcs from there, but then ultimately transitioned to entrepreneurism in 2013. Once I did that, it became a matter of, like, you'll never replace the high and the adrenaline of going into the shit. Like, my wife's son and I, we've been doing jujitsu since 2017, and that's our legal way of doing constant, person to person combat, in a healthy way. But that doesn't come close to the door kicking and the engagements and the scenarios that you're involved with in law enforcement and military. Um, so I had to figure out what that next thing was going to be that was going to be fulfilling to me and was really going to be something I could develop a passion for. And I knew that if I didn't do that, I would feel this sense of constant anxiety, a constant feeling of loss because of what I was doing. And I never also wanted to have what I call that Uncle Rico syndrome, where I would always look in the rearview mirror and think my best days were behind me. I never want that to be the case. And so I just um, figured out what it was that um, developed passion that I would look forward to every day, and started chasing that down with the same type of tenacity that I once had when I was on SWAT.
Yeah, I mean, you got to find something, right?
Hmm.
It's I was talking to Brian Callen about this the other day. It used to be the thing in Roman culture, in Greek culture, in Mongol culture, and many others throughout history, that there was kind of an ascension ritual, if you want to call it that, when people left military service or police, or whether it was a city guard or something like that. When they left service, there was some kind of ritualistic thing that happened where, at the end of your service, you were recognized for your accomplishments by society, and then you were put on track to use the skills and shit that you learned to do other, become a statesman, become a business owner,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the case is, right? That's another thing we just don't have anymore, right? It's we just kind of like, oh, thanks for your service or some platitude. Here's a gold
Mm-hmm.
watch. Now get the fuck out. You,
Right.
you got 90 days to find new health insurance or whatever the
Right.
fuck, right? I mean, that's kind of how it goes
Mm-hmm.
these days. And we look at these things like expenses too. I think that's a big problem because we do this in our own lives as well, and I think that's why we've gotten into the shape that we're in now. We look at these things on our ledger as an expense, as a cost, instead of an investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the way that you maintain your force and the way that and this is true of any force, whether it's your business or the military or your family, right? The way that you maintain it, the way that you invest in it and stuff like that, and the way you transition it from one stage in life to another really fucking matters. It matters how you do
Mm-hmm.
this stuff, right? It
Yeah.
matters the time, attention, and care you give those things. And, that's what culture really is. It's not about like, oh, my culture eats this kind of food or that kind of food. Culture stands up around the principles that
Mm-hmm.
it believes in, right? And that's the
Yeah.
true measure of culture. So, you know, when our culture gets infiltrated by stupidity, like cultural Marxism, for example, that trashes anybody that would defend the collective against the state. That's one of the primary factors of cultural Marxism, is to make sure that nobody's strong enough to take on the state, so the state
Mm-hmm.
can rule everything. That's what happens, right? When you don't have those strong cultural power centers, you become susceptible to pretty much everything, to be honest, to bad ideas, but also to authoritarianism, which is quite a bit worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, man. And we're seeing it all around us. We're, go back to the weakness piece of it, um, the way in which people look to the government constantly to be that knight in shining armor to come and solve all their problems. I see as one of the greatest threats to our society right now, because the government is more than happy to step in and say we got this, right? And was it Reagan that said, be careful of the government saying we're here to help.
He said that's
Um,
the scariest words in the English language. I'm from the government. I'm here to help.
right? Yeah, and but there's a lot of people that are like, oh, thank God you're here. These are all my problems. Solve them for me. And meanwhile, I'll be over here, collecting whatever check you want to send that you'll write from the treasury that we actually don't have the funds to back up, and we don't care, how in debt we are to our adversaries, and we don't care where the money comes from, but just solve my problems. And I really, I see the acceptance of people's willingness to allow the government to creep in more and more and more, as being something where people don't even realize they're a frog being cooked, and what the long term effect of that actually is.
Yeah, and it sucks, man. I mean, it's if you dwell on it, it can seem like an impossible problem to solve. Like it's just shitty. I mean, but I don't think so. I think it certainly sounds bad. But I tell people all the time that it's actually good news. I mean, it's good news because we caused it, and that means that we can fix it. You know what I mean? Like it's just the individual actions of the majority that change all this stuff. Just saying no to things that are stupid, refusing to participate in other people's delusions, things like that are very helpful. Every structure, from the physical world to the mental, spiritual world, whatever you want to call it, however you want to phrase that, to all of society, every structure is stronger when the base is at its strongest, right? That's why we started the country we did, with decentralized power, states' rights, individual rights, and things like that. For the first time in human history, right? We did that.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, when the state is big, the citizen is small. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're always, if enough people, for critical mass of people, have their hands out, or are you know are willing to let government solve problems in mass like that, then the state gets big and the citizen gets smaller and smaller under its weight, and that's how it'll go. That's how it will
You
always
mean like
go.
you mean like the 6 million people that are in our country now, um, plus all the other ones that were here before? that,
8 million in the last 3 years, 8 million, and we've got about in the
uh,
last 15 years about 20 million.
yeah,
It
yeah, like
seems like a
that.
lot.
That's, yeah, yeah. And that, and, when you say we can fix it, what does that even look like without a massive reset? How do we, how do we fix the fact that by design, and I believe it's by design. I believe that, the George Soroses and all of his cronies and the people that are out there that want this to happen because knowing how they're going to vote, 60+% of them are going to vote uh, on the blue side. They're going to be voting for bigger government. So, like, how do we fix it when those odds are stacked so hard against us? It's like the future. We can see the writing on the wall, in the next decade, right? With the way things are going, unless we do something. But what does that even look like?
Well, I mean, paying attention helps. Sunlight's the best disinfectant.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the first step in any kind of situation is to get people to admit there's a problem. We even have liberal politicians now, like, all right,
Mm-hmm.
the border's kind of fucked up. Maybe we should do something, which is interesting
Mm-hmm.
because usually in a Democratic, this has happened in the last couple of Democratic presidencies. But usually after the first 2 years of the first term is where they turn around. Obama, about what was it, 20 months into his first term, revamped his entire immigration policy, and he ended up deporting more people than all previous presidents combined
Right.
by the end
Yeah.
of his
Yeah.
tenure. Uh,
What do they call him? The deporter in chief or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
What
yeah.
they call him?
For some reason, it took Biden longer. I don't know if he just woke up or if it took for a while for his meds to kick in. But now they're not even trying to fix it. They're just trying to redirect blame on the Republicans, which is, that's typical political bullshit. But
Right.
as far as how you can fix it, so, you know, this is the case. You do business growth strategy and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of our friends do motivational speaking or life coaching or whatever, however you want to call it. Like, here's some tips you can use to get your feet back under and get your life on track the way you want it to be. Or you can think about it in terms of like a sports coach, baseball coach. Let's say your swing is fucked up, right? You don't go out
Mm-hmm.
to the park and try to do home run derby to fix your swing. You break your swing
Mm-hmm.
down into little increments. I can't fix hunger, but I can fix this dude's hunger right now, right? So this is why we created the system of government we did, decentralized with more power at the base, is because that's how you solve most problems in life. You start with the smallest problem and you start fixing that, right? You pick that piece of garbage up off the ground, or you help that person, you hold the door for that person, and then you graduate a little bit higher and you start building an army of people who are doing this right. Inspire, motivate other people, hold them accountable to do the same thing. And then, you'll be surprised. It's why Admiral McCraven gave that speech a couple years ago about making your bed, is because these little decisions you make throughout the day become who you are. That becomes your character. And when
Mm-hmm.
enough people do that, you become resistant to this stuff. Now, that sounds, in some ways, it sounds like a platitude, like, oh, just do the right thing and you'll have a good outcome. It's not always that simple. But in this case, there are some pragmatic things you can do about immigration, for sure. I mean, don't find out companies that hire these people, that put them on, and don't, as much as it hurts you, don't fucking buy from them. It's easy. And I'll tell you what, during Trump's tenure, when the restrictions on I-9s were hiring illegals were higher, and their ability to move back and forth across the border, we had more people. There were more immigrants leaving the country than there were coming here at that time, because
Mm-hmm.
they knew they were actually going to get arrested, and not just like, here's $2,000, good luck in the country, or whatever the fuck. And two, they knew that once they got here, the profitability for working here wasn't anymore. So,
Mm-hmm.
what your part is, one, obviously make smart decisions when you're voting, and don't vote for people who are just going to fucking threaten to send the National Guard here and force us to reopen our goddamn border in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
But
All right.
also, how you spend your money matters. Who you patronize matters. If you're going to Walmart and Target And any of these other companies, a lot of construction companies as well, who hire illegals and put them on and stuff like that, then you are actively contributing to the problem. So I don't want to hear you bitching about it, right?
Hmm. Yeah. 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 Um, and chop them out from the knees. I mean, I completely agree with you. And it's paying attention. That's really what it is paying attention to what's going on. And like you said, you know, the knowledge component of it is something that if more people were educated on what's happening, they could take better action. And with the voting piece of it, we're coming into an election, and pay attention to the policies, pay attention to people's positions on things, and don't vote based on what initial is next to their name, whether it's an R or D. Vote on what they stand for and what this country needs. Um, I mean, I completely agree with you. We're very particular about where we go, and who we support and who we endorse and where we spend our money. Um, and if the masses all do the same, people vote with their wallets, and companies will ultimately pay attention to it. We just need more people to be paying attention to who is supporting America first, and supporting our veterans, and what our country's needs are versus the company and people that aren't.
Yeah, for sure. That's a big part of it. And then there's always the short and long term fix to an issue, right? Like the short term fix to your diet might be, and when I say diet, I don't mean going on a diet. I mean changing the way you eat, right?
Mm-hmm.
My buddy Travis Chappell like just counted all of his calories and macros for a month. He's like, I don't feel that great, but I feel like I'm eating pretty well, so I'm going to count literally everything I put into my body for a month, and I'm going to go look at it and see if it matches with the kind of outcome I'm looking for. And it was
Mm-hmm.
way off. It was way
Mm-hmm.
off from what he thought. You know what I mean? Just collecting the data sometimes
Mm-hmm.
will make you more keenly aware of exactly what's going on in that particular situation. So paying attention certainly helps. I mean, because we have been very asleep at the wheel for a very long time. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And the short term version for this is certainly like the thing you can do immediately is to stop spending your money or your vote on people who don't have this country's best interest in mind. You know what I mean? Buy less shit on Amazon. Go to a local store and buy things if you can.
Mm-hmm.
Buy meat from people that you know. You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different ways you can iterate on that. And then for the larger problems, I mean, just becoming more resilient as a community. This shit doesn't happen to strong communities. It happens to weak communities. And so again, like we've got to take some blame for this because we're the ones that caused this shit through inaction and just being kind of like there's this like nihilistic flippancy to people's political views these days, where there's like for a lot of people, especially men who are just like, oh, I'm not gonna vote. Fuck that. I'm a black pill dude. I don't believe in any of this shit anymore. Anyways, it's all gonna crash. So what's the fucking point? Well, it definitely is now that you said that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're yeah, you're effectively speaking that into existence by refusing to take responsibility for your own actions, and that's quitter pussy bullshit, so far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's giving up. It's just rolling over. And, and like you were talking about earlier, the strength is in the numbers. If we have the numbers, paying attention to what's going on, your buddy that tracked his own data points, his macros and calories and all that shit. Those were his numbers that he could be sure were correct numbers. And paying attention to if you're going to look at data, quote unquote data, pay attention to the source, and make sure that the data is actually real. And if it's a sponsored survey or a sponsored poll or something, pay attention to who's sponsoring those kinds of things, and where the special interests are, and then certainly take action. The answer is not to just throw in the towel, or throw your hands up and be frustrated and count on somebody else to do the voting for you, or take action for you, because their vote may be the exact opposite of how you would vote, or their action may be the exact opposite of what you would have done.
Mm.
And so, you don't have a right to bitch and complain about what's going on if you're not going to be an active participant in being part of the change and part of the solution.
Yeah, Plato said, if you refuse to take part in your own governance, you're doomed to be ruled by fools, right? I mean, and that's
Mm-hmm.
that it's nature abhors a vacuum, and weak little sneaky fuckers love it. They love that shit. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because they
Yeah.
very rarely will someone like Lindsey Graham succeed on their own merit. They're little worms, you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? They
Mm-hmm.
succeed on the fucking backs of other people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that like if you refuse to get involved, whether it's locally or federally in governance, then those are the motherfuckers. I mean, look at Congress, man. These are
Mhm.
this is the best we could do for real. Like, there's no way
Right.
that's true. This is
Right.
just the people who were conniving enough or egocentric enough or whatever to get involved in this shit. And the reason it's not a reflection of American society as it should be. It's a reflection of our complacency, which is a fucking
Yeah.
really damaging thing for a country, right? Because not only does it have the immediate impact that it's having, which is not great, but it also, like, when we talk about projecting strength to the rest of the world and such, to keep our shipping vessels from getting attacked, for example.
Yeah.
That happens when we're strong and we're protecting,
Yeah.
or when we're projecting strength and competence, not when we're bumbling, and can't get
Right.
out complete sentences, or even when we're infighting all the time. None of this shit helps, man. It's like the really unfortunate part is, except for a few social issues for the most part. There's a couple of economic ones as well, but mostly social issues. Most people agree on most shit. It's like I want
Mm-hmm.
to keep more of my own goddamn money that I worked for. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. Those are two pretty, like, most people agree with that. Now people's brains get warped, like, oh, this is evil, or that's bad, or that's wrong, so I don't want that person to be able to do that. And the trick to that is to, you know, convince people that liberty only exists if it exists for everyone all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't, like, if you get to limit other people's liberty, then you're just an authoritarian of a different type, right? That's not acceptable. We can't accept that kind of shit. So,
Yeah.
and it only comes with responsibility. You give, if you don't act responsibly with the liberty you've been afforded, then people will try to take it away from you. That's the way it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. And it will be taken away. And you made a good point about the local and federal. That's also a really important point to emphasize is the local politics, and who it is that is getting put in office as as mayors and governors and senators, um, because the local side starts to shape the federal side, and that it's much easier to pay attention to what's going on in your own town, in your own state, and be active in what's going on there, and making sure that whoever is getting sent up to the hill, to represent you are people that you're voting for, or at least you're doing your part when it comes time to going to the polls. But that local side can't be understated. We're paying so much attention to what's happening at the White House, but what's happening in your own town and city, and what's happening in your own school boards, and all the elected officials, that your neighbors with. Are you paying attention to what's happening there?
Yeah, yeah, and it kind of sets the stage for everything else. What, like, my friend Greg Hurwitz likes to say, it's a character in one of his books, and it's reductive, sure, but how you do anything is how you do everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, every time you do the right thing, it gets easier, and every time you do the wrong thing, it gets either easier, and it scales as well. That's something that we, don't think about much as human beings. The scalability of our virtue, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
the way we do these little things, the way we treat people that we don't know, for example, they don't have anything to offer us, or the way we behave when other people aren't around to judge us or whatever the fuck. That is
Yeah.
the discipline that carries over into your actual life, and the ones
Mm-hmm.
that scale. Andrew Jackson said that one man with courage makes a majority, right? It's because it inspires people. It's hard to be a coward when somebody else is doing something courageous. Most people find it
Mm-hmm.
very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of, I guess, the inverse of the bystander effect, but on a
Mm-hmm.
much larger scale. It's hard to sit around and do nothing when other people are doing shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's why the infantry motto is "Follow me," right? It's like, we got this, just jump on board or whatever. And look, not every problem is as serious as charging into fucking battle with bayonets fixed. I'm keenly aware of that. But, you know, if you treat it with the same attitude, then you'll get successful results, right? That's how it works. There's a reason that most businesses and governments copy paramilitary organizational structures because they fucking work, right? The process of planning out an operations order and then fragment order that come in later and stuff like this whole process for complex problem solving, it works. I'm not saying that you need to fucking have your kids at parade rest making their bed in the morning and all this crazy bullshit. What I'm saying is how you do these little things matters, right? That is the test bed. That's your research, right? That's you working out, that you're working out your fucking discipline muscle. And you know, you should enjoy life. So like these, I make fun of Jocko all the time for being all serious and recording everything in black and white, but he has as much fun as anybody else. But like people get drawn into that part and think they have to live that black and white scowl face life all the time, but you're getting the wrong message from it. What he's telling you is that develop that discipline so you can enjoy life, right? That's the point.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, man. Yeah, dude, I totally agree. So what we're coming into election season. What's on your mind as we come into this whole the craziness that's going on?
Just the silliness of it all it always strikes me this time of year. Like the way that someone who's been in the public eye for 50 years, who's done things a certain way, even during this presidency, is all of a sudden trying to shift the narrative a little bit. Like I pay attention. I think this is another skill you can learn that will really benefit you in your personal life. Does someone's actions meet their fucking statements? You know what I mean? Like, are you finding major incongruities in the things people are saying and what they're doing? If so, you need to fucking disassociate from that person immediately.
Yeah, that's hypocrisy is what that is.
Yeah, yeah, and it's shallow. And the real problem with it, especially in politics these days with Citizens United, thank you, Mitt Romney, for that, is that that person with shallow roots and bankrupt principles is for sale to the highest bidder, right? So whomever can fucking, it's a different version of might makes right. You don't have to have the strongest army anymore. You just have to have enough Bitcoin to pay off some fuckface politician to do what you want, right? And shape society the way you want. That's what I think about. I don't give two fucks about candidates. I care about the Constitution. I care about, doing what's right, supporting what's right from the lowest level all the way up to the top. I think we're stuck in this hero worship syndrome for some reason. Like you mentioned earlier about, some shining knight from the government's going to come save me. Like, no, they're not, dude. They're Vikings. They're going to come rape and pillage your town is what's really going to happen. And they're going to ask you to thank them for the privilege. So fuck all that. I mean, that's what I think about every political season, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah, man. I think the hypocrisy thing that you bring up is a really important part of it because at the end of the day, how you lead yourself and how you lead your family is what you can do right here, right now. And, I know I took my son to school today and on the trip this morning on the way in, I'm talking to him about, he didn't do his chores and so he's got a load of laundry in the washer machine. And I'm asking him, did he get paid for his allowance? And he's like, yeah, I got paid. And I said, so what does that mean if you're getting paid for work you didn't do? I said, that's called welfare. And I said, that's not how we operate. That's not what this family is about. If you're going to say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. And if you make a commitment, you're going to keep it. And it was a cool opportunity for him and I to connect on it. And, he listens to Ben Shapiro and stuff. One day you walk in, he's like got Ben Shapiro. He's 14 years old.
You mean the rapper Ben Shapiro? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
I think I've heard of it.
Tom McDonald. Yeah. Yeah. I heard that the other day. But we're having this conversation and um, and it starts in the home. And so, when you talk about how you do anything is how you do everything, you know, if there's one thing that I really operate off of, I got core values, and the number one core value is to burn the ships.
Mm,
And anything that I do, and anything that this family does, because I can control what I can control, and that's that we never do anything with one foot in, one foot out. And we always operate with this victory or death mindset. And so I took the opportunity this morning to talk about a bigger picture thing, because he's 14 years old. He's got hair growing on in his armpits and all over his body, and he doesn't want to be treated like a child anymore. But if he wants to be treated like an adult, and kind of going back to that rite of passage thing, he needs to understand that there's a transition that he needs to make mentally, um, and how in everything that we do, we are to follow through with whatever commitments we make, and we do it with everything that we've got, and we burn the ships. Failure is never an option. Um, and so I think that if more conversations like that are happening within the home, and um, dads to their sons, and moms to their daughters, and across the family, it's the way in which we can get our next generation to be stronger than ours.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point for real. Burn the ships, by the way, for the audience, is a reference to Cortez when he entered the Americas, like burned all their ships. Like, we live here now, so there's no going back. And uh, yeah, building that, like just fully committing to things is a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Don't half-ass things, whole-ass things. As Ron Swanson likes to say. But yeah, that's super important. Is to take ownership of what's going on around you. You know what I mean? I mean, it
Hmm.
is not only will it make you better at solving those problems and navigating things in your life, but it also, if you there's something called the IKEA effect, where it's a psychological principle where if you receive something that's already been 80% assembled, but you finish the last 20% and put it together, you feel a greater sense of pride and ownership over whatever that happens to be. So not only is it going to help you navigate those situations, but now you feel like you're scratching that purpose itch.
Hmm.
You know what I mean, in a real way, not just like, oh, I volunteered at a soup kitchen or whichever, which is fine. I mean, you should definitely do that, and it's definitely going to help you. But when you make something yours, then it becomes completely different.
Yeah.
And on that note, you've kind of been a serial entrepreneur. You got a lot of stuff going on. Tell me about some of the projects you got going on now.
Yeah. I mean, um, I'm a co-owner of a software company called Fipro Tracker. We've got a coaching consulting company called Ignition Year, and a couples entrepreneurial community called Ubuntu. Ubuntu is an African proverb meaning "I am because we are." Um,
It's also a Linux distribution back in the day, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I hear that.
it was my favorite.
Yeah, people are like the computer software. I'm like, no, what was it, like 1994?
It was a while back.
Um,
Yeah.
hmm um, and we got a mastermind called the Lab. Of course, I mentioned I'm this chief of operations for Dr. Lyon's company. So yeah, I got a lot of different things going on. Diversification is really an important thing to us, because I want to be able to have financial independence, and money provides safety, and it provides security. It allows for me to provide in ways that I don't have to rely on other people. And I want to be diverse, because I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if there's another, COVID lockdown, bullshit scenario coming, or what's going to happen now with, you know, um, our troops being killed in Iran and Syria and all that shit. Like, I want to be financially independent. I want to have security there. Um, and so that's why we have so many different companies, and they're so diverse.
Yeah, and you guys have there's a something going on in the summertime you guys are doing. I can't remember what it was called, but I know my buddy Ray Cash Care is
Mm.
involved in it, and Gabby as well. Can you tell me about
Yeah.
that? What is it and what's going on there?
Yeah, that's cool. So our it's called the Ignite Your Life Experience. It's a 2-day event. We go whitewater rafting.
Hmm.
That's on the 19th of July. Then we go to a private diamond mixer. A friend of ours owns this a badass diamond shop. She's plugged in with the second largest diamond broker in the world. So we do a private VIP mixer there. And then the next day we have a mastermind where Ray Kashkar is speaking, Dr. Lyon, Alex Simon, Lindsay Schwartz, Jen Gottlieb, and some others. And it's all about, we have three pillars: health, wealth, and relationships. So just elevating in those three areas. And then it's being capped off with a ice bath extravaganza. We're building the world's largest ice bath. It's being engineered to have 500 people getting in all at once. It's a fundraiser for the St. Luke's Children's Cancer Institute. We are going to be donating $100,000 to this institute for kids fighting cancer, and it's going to be a big community event. We're going to projected to have over 1,000 people at it, so it's going to be a pretty badass weekend, July 19 and 20 of this year.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I like the breakdown of that because I talk about this in the veteran suicide space a lot. We've got a hardware and software issue right at the same time, and you can have one or the other, but having both fucking sucks. I mean, the hardware issue, you alluded to it before, but the average 21-year-old in America right now has the same level of testosterone that a 65-year-old had in 2001, right? That's unacceptable, obviously.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors that contribute to that, but heavy metals and plastics are probably the worst. Hormones and foods. We used to think it was primarily hormones and foods. Turns out probably heavy metals. Endocrine disruptors in general are all over the place. The soaps you use, all kinds of shit. So you should definitely look into that. And you should also find somewhere to get your hormone levels checked and get your gut health checked as well. Because if you're talking about being a functional member of society, 95% of your serotonin is developed in your gut. And if your gut's all fucked up, you're going to be a miserable piece of shit all the time, right? Like, and it's very dangerous too, because, and I mention this anytime I give these talks, everything in your life is going to be going okay for the most part, and you're still going to feel miserable, and that is a very dangerous spot to be in because there's no light at the end of that tunnel. It feels hopeless. And then, of course, the software issue. I mean, this is like one of the most under-addressed or misunderstood issues we have going these days. And what people don't know is that 30% of suicides now in the military are people that have never deployed before, ever, right? So maybe there's some stress in their life, but not the kind you think. It's not this reductive, oh, his buddy died in his arms, so now he wants to kill himself. That's not what it is anymore. Or maybe it never was, right? Like, how can so many people, how can a third of people who kill themselves in the military not have had combat experience, and then still you think combat experience is the issue? What I've learned through the years is that it isn't just like combat and stress that corrupts people's souls. It's a lack of purpose, right? Like we're all, like you mentioned, you're going to be running around uncomfortable and sad and anxious all the time and not feel right even when things are going good. You have to develop a sense of identity that is focused on service to other people, because that's how human beings are biologically programmed. That's why we build society and civilization and shit. That's why we build our families and take care of each other, is because we're programmed to do that. Because that's, you can get into a chicken or egg thing about it, but it doesn't matter because that's the way it fucking is, right?
Yeah.
So,
And doing hard shit too. We're building the world's largest ice bath. 500 people getting into it. I don't know how much ice it's going to take. I don't know how much water stay. I don't know, engineering. There's a lot of shit I don't know, that, it kind of stresses me out. But that's the entire point. The reason why, we set this 6-figure goal to donate to a charity with kids with cancer, and you can bet your ass we're not going to miss that goal. The reason why we set out to build this massive ice bath that's never been done before is because I truly believe that that we've got to get in the arena. Like we've got to do things that that challenge us to grow and to figure shit out and to make things happen. And that's where I get my sense of purpose from, is doing really big things, setting big, audacious goals that I don't know exactly how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it, and we're going to burn the ships in the process, and we're going to figure the shit out. And I've got a badass team that's fully bought into it. But just in setting these goals alone, stresses me out. But it's for a really worthwhile cause. Like the reason why we're doing it, for everybody that's coming to the event, it's like a couple centric event where we're looking to get husband and wives or boyfriends, girlfriends, or people in relationships together to have a really cool, badass experience together and something that's going to be a high watermark for their year. Um, but we didn't have to go so big with this ice bath and for this donation. Uh, but that's where that it's going to be through the process of making it happen and overcoming all of the challenges and all the different ways we're going to get told no, and we've already been told no. Like our number one spot we wanted to do it, they're like, there's no way you can set up anything like that here.
Mm.
That evolution is only going to make us better and stronger. And our Greek ancestors used to say, on the other side of adversity is where passion is found.
Mm.
And so my way of getting more passionate for life and for having greater impact is by setting big ass, borderline impossible goals and then just figuring shit out along the way. And I think that's something that's missing in a lot of people's lives. They don't set big enough goals and they don't do things that freak them out. And if it stresses them out, or if they're not quite sure how they're going to do it, they set a lower standard and they set a more comfortable standard, and they give themselves goals that they have an 85 to 100% chance of achieving. And therefore they're never really challenged, and therefore they never really learn anything, and they never really grow, and therefore they never really find this sense of achievement and passion. And I think that's missing in a lot of people's lives, and it could be easily changed by just elevating your standards and elevating your goals, and then surrounding yourself with other badasses that are going to help you get there. And they're not going to dream too small. They're going to dream just as big or bigger as you. And together, you're going to make really big shit happen.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to rise and fall to the level of the company you keep. That's a fucking fact, and it's a fine line in that dance, because everyone will ask, "What's the worst that can happen?" when they're considering something, and fucking winners will be like, "What's the worst that can happen?" and shrug, and losers will be like, "What's the worst thing can happen?" and start to ideate on what's the worst, like the worst outcomes. That is a choice that you make. You make the choice, and I'm not talking about like any kind of like vision boards and shit like that. I'm just like, practically speaking, if you sit around and let the negative bullshit like consume your thoughts about something you may or may not be willing to do, then you're gonna fucking fail. Like most of the time, you're gonna fail. If you succeed, it'll be just coincidence or luck, frankly.
Yeah.
But if you just like, well, what's the worst that can happen? Like, I'm gonna start a new business. What's the worst that can happen? It'll fail, and I'll start another one, motherfucker. You know what I mean? Like most of the people I know that have done really well in entrepreneurship have a fucking slew of failed businesses that led up to that one success, right? And then you hit on another thing that's really important. It's really good to struggle for people. It's to avoid the depression and anger, though, that comes with struggle. That struggle needs to be clearly defined. Like, the purpose of it needs to be clearly defined. I think it's a big another part of that software problem that military veterans have is like, we do all this crazy shit for what fucking purpose? You know what I mean? It's hard to convince me that anything we did in the Middle East was in support of protecting our country at this point. You know what I mean? And guys feel a certain way about that. I assume more, probably the same as Vietnam vets felt. Like, what the fuck was the point of all the, why are all my friends dead? But, and you talk to World War II veterans back in the day, and sure, they had plenty of stress as well. I mean, they saw stuff that people shouldn't see. That's just, it's happened throughout human history. But they knew it was for a reason, right? So when they fucking see their friends' gravestones, yeah, they're going to get emotional, but it's not going to lead them to kill themselves, right?
Yeah.
That shit matters.
Yeah.
It matters how we use the tools afforded to us, and that we do it responsibly. I think that makes a big difference in life. So that's something to think about, when you're, don't let the risk dissuade you. Shit, that should be an attractive thing, right?
Yeah.
Because risk
lean
is
into
always
it.
like, risk over a long enough time period is 100% invariably married to reward, right? You just have to fucking keep doing it. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. People would be better versions of themselves if they took more calculated risk with better people on their left and right, and leaned into the adversity, leaned into the opportunity to learn more about themselves and to grow. They would be better husbands, better fathers, better mothers and daughters. I mean, you're a better human as a result. And one of the saddest things to me is when somebody looks at where they're at today, and they're no better than they were 12 months ago. I think that's a really tragic thing because there's no reason other than shying away from challenge and shying away from setting big goals and surrounding yourself by losers, that it has to be that way. I mean, you're in total control over being a much better person in 12 months than you are today, but it's going to take the work. Like you've got to do the work, and knowledge is not power. It's what you do with it that becomes powerful.
Yeah, it's a good way to end this. We got to get out of here, but before we do, tell everybody where they can find you and find all your stuff. They're looking for you.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm on Instagram, Matt Schneider _official. And you bring up the thing about the toxins and the heavy metals and stuff. One thing, if any of your listeners, if they want to hit me up in my DMs, if they're interested in getting a deep dive from our practice over at the Dr. Lyon Spot, they can let me know that they listen to this, and I'll get them hooked up with a deep dive that we do over there, so they can understand what's going on in their gut.
Sweet. Well, that's yeah. I'm actually working on that process right now with Peter over at your guys' office.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So look, thanks for coming today. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime. And thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.